Okay. This is more people on one call than we've ever had, which is so tremendously exciting. 11:04. I think some people need to trickle in, but let's go ahead and get started. So like I said, this is our Google Discover panel with together with Marfeel, WTF and SEO, and we're so excited to be partnering up with Marfeel for this panel discussion, and we're so thrilled that so many of you are able to join us on this day morning. Let's go around the horn. We've got 3 great panelists today, so I'm going to give Claudio, Shelby, and Matthew an opportunity to introduce yourself very briefly, and then we'll get into the content. So let's start. Shelby, take it away.
Hello. For those of you that don't know me, I am Shelby Blackley. I am the other half of WTF is SEO. I am also the manager of Newsroom SEO at The Athletic alongside my good boss, Claudio Cabrera, who will be on this panel. Yeah, I'm very excited. Like Jessie said, this is our biggest call that we've had so far. So I'm really, really pumped to be able to talk to some great people and talk about something that's on top of all of our minds.
Amazing. I'm going to hand it over to Claudio.
Shelby, I thought you were my boss. That's what I'm confused about. But no, I'm Claudio. I lead audience development here at The Athletic. And I was at the Times from 2016 to 2022 leading search at that organization.
Okay. And let's hand it off to Matthew.
Hey, everybody. My name is Matthew Bain. I'm the North America Customer Success Manager here for Marfeel. Recognize a lot of faces and names from clients that I work with, so that's cool to see, and also a lot of new faces and names. That's fun. Before coming to Marfeel, I was mainly with the USA Today Network as a reporter, and then eventually a deputy sports editor for several regional properties. And then for a couple years after that, I was a content director in the affiliation space, basically living and dying off of search rankings and making sure we're ranking for SERPs. So really excited to chat with some really qualified, awesome people today.
Fantastic. Okay, let's hop into the content. So first thing we wanted to do is just sort of set the table, go around to our panelists and get a quick line or two of definitions or explanations of how your newsroom thinks about SEO and how you as a news SEO editor are thinking about, about Google Discover specifically. So let's hand it off first to Shelby.
Yeah, we all know that Google Discover is kind of this like weird world where it's social, but it's search. And a lot of the times when I think about it, especially in the context of The Athletic, is this additional world that we can, gain traction and show some of our best journalism. I have a really hard time, and we'll talk about this a little bit further into the panel, optimizing for Google Discover in the sense of creating a strategy or building around it. But I do think that this is a really, really great kind of subset of traffic and this opportunity for a lot of news publishers that are maybe struggling with social or the other side of search and trying to figure out what really lands and sticks with their audience. So for me, it's the extra side of search that's a little bit more fun and experimental.
Totally. Fun and experimental side of search. And so let's go over to Claudio.
Yeah, so I think Discover is a platform specifically that I feel like when it comes to a lot of US news publishers, it hasn't necessarily been explored because there seems to be like a little bit of an aversion to it when it comes to creating content specifically for another portion of Google, right? I think historically we've had enough trouble kind of getting newsrooms to acclimate to writing for search. So when you hear about something that's a little more mysterious like Google Discover, it makes it a little more troubling for newsrooms to kind of adopt to it. But what I would say is that, specifically at The Athletic, and Shelby can speak a lot to this, the localization aspect that we have here, where we have beat reporters in every market, has really kind of allowed us to kind of understand a bit more about what's really kind of like driving our audience there and what users are specifically on that platform. So I do think, whether we jump into it or not, I think locality, is really, really like a big, strong topic in that area. And I also think locality, when you attach it to authorship, and EAT specifically, if you can merge those two together, I think we have that combination, and we still haven't been able to crack that code. But I feel the more that you're able to kind of lean into that expertise and that locality will really kind of help you, not only whether you're a national brand, but also at the same time as a local brand if you're covering sports or any other topics that are important in that specific area.
Fantastic. And over to Matthew.
Yeah, I think that because of the way Discover is structured and the way it feeds the content to the users based on the user's needs and wants and all that, it really is a decent representation of what the country cares about, what your locality cares about, kind of what do they want to read? What are they swiping right on, like if it's a Tinder situation? Because, you know, when you look at the topics that are trending, and we'll get into this later when we demo a tool for Discover, some of the most popular topics, evergreen topics on Google Discover in America are Social Security, Travis Kelce, Elon Musk, cost of living, retirement. I mean, if those aren't America in a nutshell in terms of what America cares about, I don't know what is. So I think it's a really kind of accurate representation of what people sitting down on their couch on their phone actually care about. And you can use those insights in a lot of different ways.
Okay, fantastic. And teeing up what we're going to have a little later on the call, which is a bit of a demo from Matthew about all the ways Marfeel can help with your Google Discover initiatives in your newsroom. Let's dive into our very first question. It's going to go over to Shelby. Google Discover and search, as we've even just already touched on in these early introductions to the platform, can be very, very different. And so when it comes to handling an individual story at the individual story level, how are you thinking about optimizing headlines to cater to these different audiences? So do you write two versions of the headline, one for search and one for Discover, or how are you thinking about those two particular pieces of information when it comes to a story for Discover audiences?
Yeah, so I'll break this set down into two parts because at The Athletic, we have two different sections for headlines. We have what's called the reader title, which is on platform facing, and then we have the SEO or search title / headline, which is the external facing one, the one that we tend to kind of optimize for the SEO search organic world. When an editor brings me a story, the first thing I always think of is this a search play? Because, you know, 50% of the time it could be a really great search play. 50% of the time it might just be an analysis or something a little bit more futuristic that doesn't have that search side. But that's when I start thinking about the Discover part of it. And so you can kind of look at it and say, okay, what's the main focus of this headline, just like you would for any other search thing. But then you think about, okay, well, like Claudio brought up, like, is there a locality feature to this? Is there a certain part of this that's a little bit more of that, like, pitching on the excitement? What is that enticement? Lily Ray talks about this a lot of like being clickbaity, but without being clickbaity. So the example that I'll give you, and I'm actually just going to quickly share my screen so you can see the headline, is this really great Aaron Rodgers piece that we wrote this week. I don't know if it's sharing. I can't see if it is or not. There it goes. So we wrote this piece, this week about Aaron Rodgers' win against the Patriots, I believe it was last week. And the headline overall is still SEO friendly. It's still a great organic search headline, has Aaron Rodgers in it, has the Jets, but it's got a little bit more of that futuristic part to it. And it's thinking more about like, what is the great cost that's going on here? So you've got a little bit of that, like hanging on to the excitement. What are we talking about? And this piece actually ended up doing very, very well for us on Google Discover because we allowed a little bit more of that enticement, a little bit more of that curiosity gap. And that's one thing that I would really recommend on the Google Discover side is if you've got the opportunity, be a little bit more curious, be a little bit more of like keeping that gap open. The other example that I'll give you that was from this last week that did really well as well is this Arch Manning piece. Arch Manning got one of his first starts last week and everyone was talking about him. He was the big story. So we went a little bit different with it to talk about General Booty. One, yes, one of the best names in sports and already creates that enticement, but you've got a little bit more fun in this headline too. It's not necessarily a straight like General Booty is going to be starting the same day as Arch Manning, which could be the very simple way to approach this, but we went a little bit more fun with this. I remember when this came into our SEO Newsroom headline channel, I was losing my crap. I thought it was so well done. And it ended up being one of our top performers on Google Discover specifically. Even if you don't break through on the actual general search, you've got that enticement. And this one did really well in the United States. The other thing I'll bring up is that locality feature. I'm located in Canada, Toronto. So a big thing for us is obviously the Leafs. We see a ton of our Leafs coverage do really well in Canada on Google Discover for this exact reason. Oh my gosh. For this exact reason, because we'd be able to see, okay, Leafs are really of interest for people in Canada, they want to hear all these stories. And we tend to see that those locality features really lean into what people are looking for. They want to hear about the Leafs. They want to hear about what's happening with the Habs, you know? So you're thinking about that locality and then enticement at the same time.
Yeah, fantastic. And I also liked that little tip that we had in there about having a specific Slack channel for all your headline discussions. And that's a great way to manage workflow and make sure that audience editors are always having the opportunity to like ask, is this a discover headline? Is this a search play? How do we optimize it for all these different places? Having that all done on a specific dedicated headline channel is the way to go. I just want to open the floor to Matthew or Claudio if you have anything to add specifically on the question of writing headlines.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think overall, when you think about search, one thing that we've really been focused on with our newsroom is kind of getting them away from the idea of like the classic search headline. I think in a lot of newsrooms, when you give them one idea of what SEO is, they stick with it for 15 years. So it's really been kind of deprogramming the newsroom in some respects and really kind of showing them like, hey, like what we're really shooting for at this point is engaging headlines that really allow us both on platform and off platform to compete in a way, whether it's through CTR, whether it's through visibility, whatever it may be, in a way that allows us to compete in a big pool and our headline actually stand out. I'm not really a big subscriber to the idea of Google is looking for your keyword in the first word in the headline or the second word in the headline. I'm really more so focused on the fact that you need to have a headline that's extremely engaging. You need to have a photo that's extremely engaging. And also when you're looking at the asset as a totality, you need to find a way to make the asset engaging, because at this point in time, what really ends up happening is that I think the overall experience that a user has on the internet is the one that should be replicated on an article template page. So if you don't really have like those video elements or those embeds or those other things, I think it kind of turns off a reader in some respects. Text is something that's always welcomed, but I do believe the way the internet is moving, being able to kind of have a diverse set of just kind of features within a story not only helps you from like a time on site perspective, but also at the same time on a discover level as well.
For sure, that holistic approach to a story is so essential. Matthew, anything to add?
Honestly, just for headlines, I'm a big subscriber to make it as conversational as possible, but especially for Google Discover, a platform like this where, like I think Shelby was saying, it's like a social network and a search play all at once. So something I tell to clients, and I told to some of my reporters back at USA Today, was if you were in a group of your friends, if you were in your living room, okay, and you needed like 10 to 12 words to conversationally hook them on what the story might be about, I would say, Arch Manning isn't the only one. Meet General Booty. That would get my friends to read the story. And it's not clickbaity. It's engaging. It's conversational. You're trying to speak to your readers like they're on your level. They're your peers. Hey, let's talk about this topic, especially for Google Discover. I like doing that for all of them, but really, really especially for Google Discover.
I have one more thing I'd like to add that Claudio kind of leaned into, and Matthew brought it up too, of like having those keywords at the front. I think oftentimes in SEO, especially like traditional SEO, we tend to think about whatever that like main keyword is and putting it at the front, like NFL Draft 2024 : And we're really trying to get away from that because, you know, there's a lot more people that are on readers are understanding that most publications are doing that. And so it's that additional context that you can give. So for example, with some of our draft coverage from our recruiting team and whatnot, and our scouting team, it's more like who are the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL draft that you need to watch for, and giving a little bit more of that enticement versus just having NFL Draft 2024 top quarterbacks that you need to watch or top recruits that you need to watch. So thinking about how you're developing that enticement.
And one thing I'd also add to that, Shelby, too, is that I think, you know, and I think when you remove Discover from the conversation, I think what's important to think about when you're working in a newsroom, specifically from the audience side and interacting with editors, is, you know, specifically when you talk about sports, like people know what the result is, but what people want to know is what expertise do you have and what is the question coming out of that specific event, right? So we know that the Bears won last night, right? But what we don't know is like what the reason for the Bears victory was. Like, what did this quarterback particularly play well, right? So I think when you're able to move your newsroom in a direction, exactly, why is Malik Willis this good, right? Like, should he be the starting quarterback, which he shouldn't be, right? But the by answering those questions, I think it naturally allows you to kind of get into a place where you're actually being able to answer questions that people are looking for on these specific platforms, right? So the click-through is naturally going to be higher, which will allow you to get to a place where you're seeing more visibility on Discover and on other platforms as well.
And I just wanted to say one thing about what Shelby said with those hammerhead headlines where it's the words and then quote. Really, in my opinion, only use those in two situations. If you've got a quote that you want, I don't know why they're celebrating me. There's balloons. I'm a celebrated figure. I love it. So yeah, thank you, Mike. So either if you're starting a headline with a quote and then having the rest of the headline after that, that's the time when you can use the hammerhead, and then also live updates. Those are basically the only two times when, from my experience, I think it's going to be helpful, because like Claudio and Shelby are saying, just NFL draft 2024 : information. That's so outdated. Google is smart enough now to where you don't need to stuff your headlines that way. Make it conversational, make it engaging, make it human to human. That's what's going to help with Google, human to human.
Perfect. I want to build on a question that I just saw in the chat and throw this over to Claudio. As we sort of touched on, Discover isn't necessarily traffic that we should count on. Often Discover is volatile, and audiences maybe are more passive than they are when they're actively seeking out some information on search. So two-part question. How do you think about Google Discover, or how does your newsroom think about Discover traffic as part of a broader strategy versus something that is nice to have? And then part two on this is The Athletic has a paywall. The Athletic is a subscription-based business. So with that in mind, how are you putting Discover into, how is Discover as a puzzle piece fitting into the broader picture there?
Yeah, well, when it comes to Discover, I think what's important to understand, at least in the American market, because I know, a lot of my friends in Spain and Latin America and Europe, there's much more iPhone usage here. So Discover isn't something that penetrates as much as it does in other markets where, Discover may drive 80% of traffic in Spain, it may drive 20% of traffic in the US, right? When I think about newsrooms in general, it kind of, starting with that, it kind of puts us in a place where a lot of the users don't necessarily understand it. A lot of the editors and reporters don't, because it's not something that's really front and center to them, in this specific market. Now, to your second question around the subscription model, right? I think what's important to understand with Discover is that I view it as like a habit builder that can lead to subscriptions versus kind of thinking about how to hack for subscriptions, right? So I'll give you an example, right? The Athletic is obviously on the New York Times platform, right? So we have a module that's all the way down, right? Before we were on the New York Times platform, maybe a lot of users on the Athletic maybe a lot of users on the Times didn't necessarily know who the Athletic was, right? But now that they do, we're building an habituation with that specific audience, right? And that's how I kind of view Google Discover. I don't view Google Discover as something where you should be applying paywalls to it or anything like that, just because I feel like it's pretty proven at this point that it's a product that really wants the content to be free on there, right? For the most part, right? I think number two, once you get past that part of it, I think what's really important, and I think what most brands really need to kind of focus on once they get to the place where they've kind of cracked Discover, is really how do you build an on-page experience that allows you to build a habit for that user or build a relationship with that user, right? Because I'm a big believer that sometimes a lot of people just go on the internet and click on something and look at the first thing that they do. And it's like, okay, like I went to this website and now I'm leaving, right? But if you can actually build a bridge for that user to kind of say, all right, I came in on this Malik Willis item. Like, what are the other Packers related items that are showing up on this page, the other Malik Willis items that are showing up on this page, that will allow me to kind of follow through and consume the Athletic much more is going to be really important. And then I think you could potentially get to a place where you can convert subscribers on that specific platform. I think too many times, I think naturally we look at like, oh my God, we're getting 80 million views or 8 million views from Discover. Like, how do we actually convert this, right? Versus actually kind of thinking about the product experience and how do we make that better? Because really the goal at this point is, how you can convert that person at least to a Reggie, but also at the same time, I think the goal for a lot of subscription brands, when you think about it, is really retention, right? And really, when you think about retention, the main issue with retention is usually product experience, right? So if you get product experience right, you could probably prevent churn. If you get product experience right on a platform like Google Discover that's driving tons of traffic, you could prevent churn, but you can also increase subscriptions at the same time, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. The on-page experience is really what people like. If you get on a page and suddenly you're bombarded with a million ads and pop-ups, it's not really, you're not really giving readers a reason to stay and stick around and read your other great content and build that habit, as you said.
And one other thing that I'd add to really quickly, and it goes to Shelby's point and also Matthew's point as well, is that I also view Discover as this place where you can really content test. One thing that we're really good about at The Athletic, I would say, is we're big on saying, all right, like with the Chicago Bears, let's test this item, this content item. Let's say it's fact or fiction. Let's say it's a debate. Let's say whatever content experiment we want to try. And we really try to see how it does on multiple platforms. And then after that point, if we see like, hey, like when we do a fact or fiction, or we do a takeaways, or we do a debate, it really kind of breaks through on Discover. It allows us the opportunity to actually say, all right, like maybe we should do this for 30 teams. Maybe we should do this once a month, right? So it's really a place where I feel like you should just continue testing from a content perspective versus just kind of saying, hey, like this works, let's do this 1,000 times, instead of like trying 1,000 different things and seeing which of these actually work, if that makes sense.
Go for it, Shelby.
I was gonna say, because I just want to like jump off of the athletic part of this, is the other thing that we noticed, and I'm going to kind of touch on Steffi's question in the chat, is that locality feature. We are a national publication as The Athletic, but we notice in different areas, certain teams will pop up. So for example, in LA, we're seeing a ton of Ohtani and Dodgers content do well on Discover because that's what's the hot topic. That's what people are looking for. And it ties into that social point. I mean, he's the only guy to do a 50 and a 50, right? So people are going to talk about that. What's the extra additional content that we can give there that's going to give that enticement of that locality? But then, you know, like I said, in Toronto, we're going to see a lot more of Sean McIndoe's pieces, Down Goes Brown, who writes about the Leafs or writes a little bit more of that funny content that is not necessarily serious sports, but it still brings that enticement of sports. And if we see that does well, then we might go back to Sean and say, hey, do you want to write, you know, I think it was when the Leafs beat the Lightning a couple of years ago, we wrote this really funny thing being like, you know, hold tight, Leafs fans, it's actually real. They actually did win a series. And that piece went crazy on Discover, but also on search because you see that connection. And so even though we're a national publication, we lean into that locality of understanding that we've got beat coverage across the entire country. And there's certain pieces that are going to do well in certain areas. Like California is a completely different beast than New York. And so if we start seeing something doing really well in California, we might be like, okay, we can try that for the New York audience, but it may not stick the same way. So to Claudio's point, really thinking about what are those content pieces that do well for specific areas. And I know a lot of people here work for a local news organization. So really honing in on what does Google Search Console give you for the data in terms of locality, but also looking at your own data and saying, okay, we're seeing this do really well with, you know, our internal audience. Maybe there's more opportunity here, and really thinking about that experimental side of things.
Totally. And just to hone in on this point, which is about internal newsroom, which is a little bit about like, how do you communicate these things in the newsroom? I saw a question about how do you go from thinking about Discover, analyzing Discover, and actually making that into actionable things for your newsroom. So if you had any tips on, you've done your data analysis on Discoveries, you think these are the formats that work, these are the topics that are resonating, how do you then translate that into story ideas and pitches and projects for editors to take on?
It's a real exercise in kind of threading the needle. I think it really depends on the culture of your newsroom. I think if you have a newsroom that's producing original content like 90% of the time, which are the newsrooms that me and Shelby are working in at the moment, and it's going to be really, really kind of difficult, just to be quite frank with you guys, to really kind of implement Discover as a strategy. But what I would say that's really important is really kind of finding like those specific topics, those specific players, at least from a sports perspective, that really kind of tend to stand out in those specific in Google Discover. And really kind of seeing like what are really kind of scanning those specific files, how they're performing, what features that do they have within them, but also at the same time really realizing like what you actually did with those files once they published. Were they on the homepage? Were they on the newsletter? Were they socially focused? Where were they on the homepage? So I think with Discover, more than anything, a lot of people may focus on what the experience is within, which is really important on an article template. But I also think like everything that you do around it is also extremely important. And the speed that you do it at is also really key as well. And I think the other thing that I would mention that I think has worked for some is, really kind of spacing things out. Don't feel like you necessarily need to publish everything at a specific time. There's discover audiences at all points in the day, and we see those peaks at different periods of the day. So really kind of figuring out what works in specific sports and specific news like politics and other areas at certain times can really help give like breakthrough, because most publishers tend to go very early, and sometimes really like holding some content for the midday and early evening can really give you an opportunity that, it may be a gap that others may not be filling necessarily.
Those are all super, super really good points from Claudio. And I also think from an overall kind of content strategy perspective, Google Discover can help you discover which topics you have authority on. Because it's such a topics-driven platform, you're going to see, oh, I'm getting a bunch of Social Security traffic. Oh, I'm getting a bunch of traffic, Kelsey traffic. You can kind of find out what Google deems you an authority on from your Google Discover traffic. And then from there, you can build topic clusters, okay? Once Google Discover is telling you, hey, we see you as a Travis Kelce authority. Okay, let's hammer that home. Let's build a really nice topic cluster around Travis Kelce. So that way, each time we produce a Travis Kelce story, we have this topic cluster map. So we're internal linking, right? We're internal linking to all of our Travis Kelce content when we write Travis Kelce content. Google likes maps. That's why it's called a sitemap. That's the way Google understands your website. Think of a topic cluster and think of your internal linking strategies as providing a map. Anytime you have a Travis Kelce story and Google crawls it, wow, look at those 4 or 5 other stories they're linking to in this. That's really good content that just bolsters their authority on Travis Kelce. Man, I'm going to bump them up 2 spots. Okay, that's kind of a topics-driven content strategy.
Any other? Oh, so go for it.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say, I just love that point of like the entities, and someone asked it in the chat too, like, do you focus on like the keywords or the entities? And 100% it's the entities. Like you need to think about the topic authority of your site, especially if you're a news publication. What are those things that you tend to write on about more? Is it social reform in your community? Is it gun violence? Is it all these different things that you're focusing on? And not necessarily how can you lean into it, but how can you produce the best content around that not only helps the readers, but makes the readers want to click more. There's obviously the caveat in America that Google Discover isn't as readily accessible, but in any of these localities, there's still that point of like, if someone sees something that is relevant to them or relevant to their lives, they want to read it. They want to learn more about it. If it's an interest to them, we think about it. YFYL, we talk about a lot because it's those entities or those topics that directly impact a person. So outside of sports, if you're writing about, things that are happening in your community, but you're still thinking about the way that you're approaching it in the headline, adding those embeds, using those original images, we can talk a little bit more about that later if we want. You're providing that service, and then Google starts to see that engagement, and then they might pop it up on Discover, and then you see, okay, us covering gun violence in the community is doing better on both search and Discover. Maybe we do need more of that.
For sure. Okay, just being cognizant of time, I do want to hop over to our third question, which is going to Matthew. Can you tell us a little bit about how Google fits into other parts of the algorithm? Is something that takes off to Discover, something taking off to Discover, does that help it perform better on search? Or is Google Discover a bit of a testing ground for the rest of Google?
Sure. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Got a little very, very well put together things. Can everybody see my screen? Yay, nay? There we go.
Yeah, you were good.
Awesome. Okay. You saw the infinity screen for a second. Sorry for the seizures, everybody. Okay. So the short answer to that question is, as we've discussed earlier, yes, Google Discover can be kind of a testing ground for your other platforms because it's a way to see what people are caring about. It's a way to see what people are talking about. And when something is presented to them, do they like it or not? Great testing ground. But there is also something to be said for, yes, certain practices that you do for one platform on Google is going to work for all of them. You could think of it as a tree, right? So if you have a really, really strong tree trunk of best Google practices, it's going to help you in search. It's going to help you in Discover. It's going to help you in Google News, okay? So having that strong foundation is going to help you everywhere. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some specific things that can help mostly with Discover. These 3 on the screen are things that come up to me. By no means this isn't all of them, but engagement time, buzz factor, and paying attention to your visuals is really key for Discover. For engagement time, Discover really cares about if something is helpful to the user, because it's literally presenting them with a story. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it helpful? And a great way for Google to see if something is helpful is how long are they staying on the story? Are they interacting with the story? Are they scrolling? Are they clicking on things? So this is playing around with subheading strategy to try to boost your engagement time, playing around with multimedia strategies. I really, really like it when there's tools or interactive graphics in a story. You know, like something like, I'm going to put my zip code in this tool and it's going to tell me all the voting locations within 5 miles of me, or it's going to tell me all the Italian restaurants around me, okay? Things like that are going to boost your engagement time, and that is going to have a direct A to B, in my opinion, correlation on boosting Google Discover. Another is buzz factor. This is kind of a catch-all term that's basically how can you send green flags to Google to say, hey, notice this content, push it up on Google Discover. One buzz factor that's talked about a lot is like social engagement. So if something is getting a lot of engagement on Twitter, a lot of engagement on Facebook, that's going to be a green flag to Google to push it up on Google Discover. But another thing that a lot of our clients are doing, and we think is helpful, is if a story gets a lot of good traffic in a short amount of time, so not bots, good organic traffic in a short amount of time, that's almost like this explosion, this green flag to Google that says, oh, maybe we should rise you on Google Discover. So what you could do is if you have a story on your site that's getting tons of traffic right now, okay, and then you have this story here that you think would do well on Google Discover, you could, in this story getting tons of traffic, use a content recommender. Like Marfeel has content recommenders, other like most red widgets, there's a bunch out there. We offer one that's a flow card, to where when you scroll through the story like 10 to 20% down, you then get a flow card of different stories that are recommended. Some of our clients are putting this story that they want to do well on Google Discover as the #1 story in that content recommender on the really, really popular story. So the hope is that these tons of people reading this one story, a good chunk of them are going to click on the highly recommended story in that, and then head over to the Google Discover story, giving it a large amount of traffic in a short amount of time, giving a green flag to Google to notice it. And that's only half the battle, right? Because if a bunch of people go to the story and it's awful, and they're bouncing 5 seconds, then it's actually going to be a bad thing. So this content still needs to be very strong, but that's a way to kind of play around with it. And then paying attention to your visuals, much more so than search and news. Google Discover is a visual medium. It's worth effort to get your reporters and editors on board with how to create compelling visuals, compelling graphics, how to use simple online editors to kind of splice collages together. That's one aspect of it. But there's also the technical aspect of it. So this is a screenshot of one of our tools. This is our site technology audits. And you can see things that are specifically impacting Google Discover. And the reason I show this is because a lot of clients come to us and say, I want to boost my Google Discover traffic. And oftentimes the first thing I do is I take them to the site technology section, where you see a lot of links and audits specifically affecting Google Discover. Like this one here, the robots tag with the large directive, that's a common one. Anything with an issue with the image URL, that's going to affect Google Discover. You've got this one's here. Lots of times we see the image width isn't 1200 pixels or higher. Image not matching declared dimensions, 2.43K links affected like this, okay? So you want to attack it from the technical perspective first, okay? Once you have that foundation that, okay, at least we're getting all of our metadata, structured data, everything, our coding correct, then you can kind of go from there and try to boost the visuals. And then one more thing that I think is super important for Discover and for all Google algorithm is I am firmly on the bandwagon that the About Us page should be the strongest page on your site. I think this is a fantastic way to boost EEAT. And I think a lot of sites, you know, maybe don't put the effort in that should be put in. I see some that are all about history. I have a friend who showed me one of their history pages a couple weeks ago. And the first half of the page was talking about their history goes back to 1800. It's like, that's great. But just because you're old doesn't mean I should trust you. You know, I want to learn less history. I want to learn more about your editorial process. Tell me about your review process. Tell me about your correction policy. If you're having affiliation on your site, tell me all about that. Please, no mission statement. That's going back to the headline stuff. Who in their right mind in a conversational says, my mission statement is this? No, it's who are we? Who we are. Here's what we're all about. Spell out the reasons to trust you and invite investigation, right? Put multiple opportunities to contact you and contact different people. Be an innocent suspect in a criminal investigation, right? Be the ones that are inviting the cops to your house to say, hey, learn all you want about me. I've got nothing to hide. So a couple examples here that do it really well. And these are both sites that get good traffic from Google Discover in competitive spaces. So the kitchen is really really excels in the food space, which, as you can imagine, would be highly competitive. I love our story, what we're all about. It's conversational, it's great, meet the team. But then this is where I really start to love it. This is almost like their editorial process. Here's how they put together the recipes and why you should like them. This one here, our DEI commitment. This is essentially them saying, here's our process, here's our vetting process, here's the type of staff that we hire to get a worldwide perspective on giving you the best food from around the world. And then this is saying, hey, we do affiliation. We're being completely open about it. Here's why you can trust us. I love that they're saying, hey, here's our parent company, learn more about that. And then here's how you can learn more about us and get in contact with us. Love that. And then Guitar World is very good in the music space, which, as you can imagine, is competitive. And I love their Who We Are section, okay? You've got the name, face, every which way. I'm a click away from seeing their social media. I'm a click away from emailing them, all from the About page. I would also suggest connecting your Muckrack accounts here. That's a really good indication for Google if it's connected to Muckrack. And I really, really like how they're linking to other work they've done. Okay, not only am I writing for here, but I've written for these other music publications as well. I have expertise, I have authority, you can trust me. And on top of that, they also link to the bands that they've been a part of, to the albums that they've released. A lot of these people writing for this music site are musicians, former musicians, using a linking strategy directly on the About page to convey, hey, I'm a musician writing for musicians, is going to work wonders for EEAT. So seeing this, I'm not surprised at all that Guitar World, even though you might not have heard about it much, does very, very well on Google Discover. So those are some things that I think you should emphasize in general for Google, but then going back to the top, that engagement time, buzz factors, and paying attention to visuals are three kind of specific ones to Google Discover.
Fantastic. I would just wonder, though, for Claudio or Shelby, having worked at larger organizations, doing that update to, like, the kitchen is maybe a smaller or mid-sized organization. Are there any things that you've done at bigger organizations like The Athletic or The Times to boost your EEAT, and how was that rollout internally in the newsroom? How did it go? I can imagine at a smaller publication, if you've got a couple dozen writers, easy enough to go one by one and say, please update your bio and include these things. But if you're an organization with hundreds of reporters and tons of staffers, do you see that as a worthwhile endeavor at that scale or size, and how might you manage that project?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I think at bigger organizations like The Athletic is 600 people, The Times, I don't even know how many, it's way more than that. I think what's really important is kind of differentiating between what a product fix is and also what a pure just like bio page fix is. I think what you've seen with The Times specifically in changing their author pages is that they've completely transformed them to make them their own experience in a sense. So when you actually are reading an article, it allows you to understand that not only is this person an expert on this topic, but this person is actually there at the moment, right? So I think that specific fix at the Times was a key one because it really allowed us at that point to kind of build more trust with the reader overall. And it was something that really kind of boosted them from a visibility perspective as well. And I think that's the journey we're on currently at The Athletic. But I think the main thing is really kind of connecting with a specific vertical and taking it step by step, right? Find the vertical that's most open to actually changing their bios, changing them quickly, making sure we actually shift things from an authorship perspective, and then kind of building it out through there. But then probably the most important marriage in any newsroom is product and audience, and product and editorial. Those are like the three most important marriages, in my opinion, in a newsroom. And really kind of like, I guess what's the word I'm looking for here, signaling the importance level of making these pages much stronger and the effects that you think they can have without being able to really kind of quantify them is really going to be important when it comes to kind of building a strategy that's really centered on authority and expertise.
Totally. Fantastic.
Yeah. I just want to quickly add, because like at The Athletic, we're trying to kind of take some signals or, learn from the Times in terms of building up those author bios. So one of the things that my team is doing editorially right now is actually reaching out to every single vertical being every sport, NHL, NFL, NBA, college sports. And we're updating their author bios based on what they were when they first started, which could be anywhere from 5 to 6 years ago to last year, and just making sure that everything is up to date. And then in 2025, one of our priorities is going to be, how do we build up that authorship level of this to really hone in on the expertise of those writers that we have in our arsenal.
Totally. Mike has a good suggestion in the chat, which is to get a form that asks a set number of questions for people, and then they can use those answers that they've generated from that form as the starting point if reporters are tasked with updating their bios. And I've dropped a couple links into the chat, as has Shelby, with the examples from the New York Times, but they're great author pages. And I've also dropped in links to our EEAT, our topic authority newsletters, as well as a newsletter that we had all about authorship. So if those things are of interest, we have that. With that said, I'm going to hop over to give Matthew the floor. Matthew, go ahead and screen share and take it away.
Let's do it. I'm going to give you all a seizure again just for a second. Be prepared. Okay. Are we all able to see my screen? I just need one vocal yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, we made it. Welcome to the demo portion of this program. We're going to go over Discover Monitoring today. This is a tool that we're really excited about at Marfeel. It's essentially the crowd tangle of Google Discover. You know, we've been discussing a lot of different ways to gather insights and different strategies and different things today. This is a way to visualize all of it, to get insights really, really quickly, and be able to inform your content strategies. So out of the box, we've got 47 pre-built boards ready for you to take a look at. And the way it works is it's country and language. Okay, so the Argentina national board in Spanish. We're scrolling down to the United States. We have both in English and in Spanish. And once you're in these boards, you can filter it to specific cities, which again, as we've been going over today, locality is huge for Google Discover. And that's something pretty unique to us, that we allow you to look at a granular level, city by city. And to emphasize that point, I'm going to show you how you can create a new board, okay? And you could pick from thousands upon thousands of cities to choose from. So for instance, I'm in Des Moines. There we go. I could do Des Moines and West Des Moines. Cool. It includes the suburb too, okay? If I type in United States, I'm going to AbLib now for about 2 minutes, because look at all the cities you can choose from, okay? Completely granular level insights. You don't need to just look at what's going on in the United States. You don't need to look at what's just going on in my state. I can do my exact city. Mission Hills, Klamath Falls, Selma, okay? Lutz, Snellville, Suwannee, Northfield, Summers, all these cities you can do. Ashland, I don't even know what half of these are, but you can do them, okay? So I want to emphasize that. But now let's jump into the United States in English board, and let's take a look at this. Okay, so these are the top posts on Google Discover visualized for you over the last 2 hours. You could do any time frame you want, but we'll keep it a last 2 hours. This is going to be the name of the post that's having success, the image, the host, and then these are the top 2 topics attached to this story. These are pulled directly from Google Discover. We aren't coming up with these. This is from Google Discover when the story was published. And then this is visibility, okay? So this is basically a metric that looks at where a story is ranking, how long it's on the feed, and then the location of those things. So for instance, a #1 ranking in New York City, you're going to get more visibility than a #1 ranking in Fargo, North Dakota, okay? And then time on feed is pretty self-explanatory, okay? So here are the posts, but we could also look at which topics are popping off over the last couple hours. Travis Kelce's big, water dispenser, product recall, interesting. Let's learn more about that. We click on product recall and we can see the associated subtopics that are also popping. I see milk, so I'm going to guess there's a milk product recall. If we want to find out, let's click on this filter so we can see all the stories under the product recall. And yep, we can see here. So a quick use case is, say I'm a Miami-based operator, right? I'm a Miami outlet. Is there something here that I can localize? Is Florida one of these 27 states? Walmart. There are Walmarts in Florida. There are Walmarts in Miami. You bet I can localize this. And look at this visibility. Look at this time on feed. If I can quickly in the next hour create a localized story about, hey, Miami Walmart shoppers, these are the 2 products that you can't use anymore. Boom, boom, boom. You're going to get some traffic. Okay. You can also play around with some filters here. So you can filter by host. If you just want to see a certain yourself, or you just want to see a certain host, filter by topic, filter by title. So this is interesting. Like in the Olympics, for instance, if you only wanted to see posts that had Simone Biles in the title, you could set that filter. Article publish date, and then city. This is the really cool thing that I was talking about. We're seeing the United States Google Discover board right now. Let's just look at Miami. I'm a Miami paper. That's all I care about. Okay. So we can see the top ones are most likely going to be the same. But as you scroll down, we start to see Florida, storm tracker, storm, storm, 2 Florida restaurants, Florida governor, so on and so forth. So you can see how it changes when you change locations and all that stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a quick use case. Let's see. I want to see, scroll. Maybe I'll be this one. Okay, is that, yep, NBC Miami. So that is a Miami outlet. Okay, so let's click on this host to see all of their content right now. So this is their content doing well on Google Discover right now. This is the visibility and the time on feed in Miami. So if I click on this topic, that will show me all the weather content in Miami doing well, so I can see how I compare and then go from there. So let's click on the weather topic. Let's X out of this host filter so we can see all of it. And now I can see, wow, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th place. Okay, so I'm not doing very well right now within the weather topic in Miami, which isn't great because there's a tropical storm coming, there's a cyclone. So I want to be ranking better for that. So what are a couple things I can do to try to boost myself? You just click on the story and it'll take you directly to the story. What you could do is open our Copilot extension. This is our AI helper, okay? And you can use it to analyze your own content. You can use it to analyze other people's content. You can use it to help write your content in your Google Docs, CMS, so on and so forth. But we're going to open up Copilot here. We're going to click on the editing tab, and I'm going to click helpfulness evaluation. And this is our Copilot taking your story through the Google helpfulness metrics and seeing how it's doing, okay? Do you need to make some edits? Looks like you do. The article could be improved. Here's why, and then here's tips how to improve it specifically for Google's helpfulness metrics. A 10 to 15 minute edit is going to make Google like your story much, much more. You could also go to the top here. This one's performing the best. Let's try to find out a little bit more about that. Okay, so something I like to do here is do outline structure. Okay, so Google Discover is very big on engagement time, helpfulness, right? So what is a good way to structure a story? So what our Copilot does is it looks at this story, kind of takes the topics from it, what it does right, kind of similar to how it structures it, and then creates its own option of a structure that you could put for your own story. So you could take this structure and put it on your own story that you've been working with now, or if you're writing a new story, this could be the starting point for a really successful, highly engaged outline for that new story. Or you could also click on expansion ideas. This is Copilot reading the story and coming up with questions that a reader might have afterwards. So essentially, these questions aren't thoroughly answered, or they're not answered at all. So if you go in and make sure your story answers these questions, chances are you might get some helpfulness upgrade, and you might be able to rise in the Google Discover rankings. Okay, so there is that. That's for some, I guess, real-time or in-the-moment use cases. But what about if you want to see, hey, what pops like over a long period of time? What are some good evergreen topics that where if I write it today or if I write it 2 weeks from now, I'm going to get some good traffic? And we can help you with that too. So we'll go to last 28 days and we'll go to topics. So now we're seeing the topics that have staying power, that have evergreen ability, that have a long shelf life on Google Discover. Not at all surprised to see Social Security. I was just talking with a client the other day who has a friend that realized, wow, our site gets a lot of Social Security traffic from Google Discover. I'm going to do one Social Security story a week and just see if that works. And the proof is in the pudding here. It's the #1 topic. But what I also want to point out is the number of posts here. Okay, so we want to see topics that have a lot of visibility, but maybe not a lot of posts. Because, for instance, Kamala Harris here, tons of visibility, but on a lot of posts. So for that return on investment piece, you're not going to get as much writing about Kamala Harris as you would for daylight savings, just 31 posts, as you would for cost of living, 15. Even Travis Kelce, 53. Elon Musk, 53. Bankruptcy, just 11. Parent, just 11. Psychology, just 24. Okay, so you can kind of see, okay, what are those high return on investment, high yield, evergreen topics? You can do similar practice looking at hosts that do really well. What can we learn from these sites that are doing really well in Google Discover? Same thing. You want high visibility, but low posts. I'm not going to learn much from Yahoo. They've got high visibility, but 600 posts. Okay. I might learn from Totodiska, just 53 posts. I'm going to learn from GE Editing, 52 posts. You bet I'm going to learn from Daily Dot, just 65. Okay, so let's try to learn. Let's see what Totodiska is doing well. And no surprise, daylight saving, Elon Musk, cost of living, Social Security, daylight savings, Social Security. Okay, this is very interesting. This is not telling your newsrooms to only write about 3 topics, but This is showing you that this site, Totodiska, has found what resonates on Google Discover, and it's trying to hit that hard. And they're clearly getting tons and tons of traffic from hitting those big topics. That's really interesting to see. I wonder if they have a tool that helps them see that. I don't know, maybe they do. We'll go ahead and scroll on down to hosts again. Let's see what GE editing does. So they're doing a lot of the parent and relationship psychology. Okay, so we saw that those topics had a lot of return on investment and had a lot of visibility. So they've clearly identified, we're going to do listicles that focus on like parent-child relationships and psychology. Cool, cool. Okay, let's see what the Daily Dot was doing. Let's see. Okay, let's scroll through. And chances are you're seeing what I'm seeing. Every single headline is structured the same. Quote, rest of headline. Quote, rest of headline. Quote, rest of headline. And look at the images. They're all the same as well. Okay, the three spliced doing that like the easy edit collage form. Okay, so Daily Dot has clearly found a strategy as well. Okay, so that's cool to see. They've clearly said, I'm going to scroll to see if there's anything that even isn't that. No. Literally every single headline is quote, rest of headline, and then the image. So that's really, really neat to see. A couple more super quick use cases you can do is we do have some cross-regional and cross language functionality. So for instance, for a Miami outlet, if you want to know what your Spanish-speaking audience is reading, you can look here, and maybe there's something that your Spanish readers are reading that your English readers might want to read as well. Or for cross kind of country focus. For Argentina, for instance, we have a lot of clients in Argentina, and they get a decent chunk of readers from Uruguay because it's a bordering country with a large population. So they might also want to see, hey, what's going on in Uruguay? Is there something that we should write from our Argentina-based property that might attract some of our Uruguay readers? So there's that. So that was a whole bunch of talking. I'm cognizant of time here. We've got 5 minutes left till the top of the hour. So I'm going to stop sharing, give the screen back to
me. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. But yes, so also, oh my goodness, one more thing. I'm totally glad I didn't forget this. So, boom, boom, boom. Okay, we're offering a discount. Okay, so for anybody who wants to use the Marfeel monitoring products, it includes Discover monitoring, but also social monitoring, which is for social media, and then SERP monitoring, which is for Google search results. You can reach out to a member of our team, use the WTF SEO code, and we're going to give that to you at a discount for viewers of this webinar. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks so much, Matthew, and we'll be sure to include the code in any recap or anything we've got going forward. So thank you again to Matthew for this great presentation and all the useful data and insights that Marfeel offers. And thanks more broadly to Marfeel for being our partner for today's call. In the last 4 minutes, I wanted to go back to our speakers and do a sort of lightning round. There were a ton of really great questions in the chat, but one I saw come up a couple times was, what is the metric that you care about most? Or what are the 2 or 3 metrics that you care about most when it comes to Google Discover? We can do this lightning round, and then I'll just let's start with Claudio.
Hey, how's it going? This was great, by the way, and Matthew, that was exceptional. So really just wanted to shout you out on that. I think number one for me, Google Discover, I think just kind of seeing, I don't know if there's particularly a metric that I would say. I think for me, really, it's like going into GSC and really kind of understanding what it is that's really kind of showing up is really more important for me, I think, because I think what's really key more than anything is finding a way to just kind of build that habit, but also at the same time seeing what really works from like a content perspective with those specific audiences. So I don't know if there's particularly a metric per se. I think time on site and things of that nature are always super helpful, but I'm really more focused on like, how can we create an editorial strategy that's actually valuable in-house, because that's really, really hard to do, and connect it to Google Discover at the same time? Because a lot of times what ends up happening is that those two strategies are very different, and it creates a real tension within the newsroom. And that tends to happen a lot in American newsrooms. So it's really kind of connecting the dots in some respects.
Over to Shelby.
Yeah, I tend to personally, because I'm a little bit closer to like the lower level, I look at the CTR. So not necessarily like how much clicks or how much impressions they're getting, but how much it's being clicked on. If it's above our average, I'm like, hell yes. What did we do in this headline? What is exactly, you know, kind of the recipe for success? What do my colleagues see? What did they work on in terms of this headline, and kind of do some of that feedback. But if it's below the threshold, then I ask myself, okay, well, it showed up on Discover, but why wasn't it hitting in the same way? What was missing in this? Was it an entity problem? Was it the headline? Was it something in terms of locality? Where did it show up? I keep bringing it back to Canada, but I have to, in the sense of like, in Canada, we see a different click-through rate than we do in America. So if it's below or above that threshold, okay, well, did we hit the audience properly? Or was it just something that did not stick? So I use that as kind of like that directional method to what Claudio mentioned of like getting that buy-in and saying, hey, we have this random audience on Discover that really, really likes content about the Winnipeg Jets. This is true, by the way. So how do we write more about the Winnipeg Jets, which is this abstract team in Canada? Do we want to do that? How do we build that into the overall strategy of the NHL vertical, and then kind of build from there? Like I said off the top, Google Discover is this nice to have. So I use it as a lot more of this experimental, what's going on? How can we build up to it? I completely understand that outside of America, it's completely different, but using it as that guide way, almost this directional arrow of what you need to work on or what you want to work on, I think is the way to do it.
Totally. And Matthew, final thoughts?
Time on feed. I think time on feed is a big deal for Google Discover. I mean, oftentimes you'll see, like, if there's a breaking news situation, you'll see 4 or 5 outlets pushing the same thing at once, and they all kind of start off in the same. And then you notice the 3 kind of tank down and drop off the feed, and then the other 2 stay on the feed more. And that's a really direct correlation with, are the users liking it? Are they staying on the story? Showing high engagement time, showing Google, hey, we like this. And you'll be able to see that with time on feed. So if there's a piece of content that has 30 minutes time on feed over the past 2 hours and one that has 5 minutes and they were published at the same time, that's a direct flag that one is more successful with the users.
Terrific. Okay, looking at our time, we are right at noon. So I just want to say thank you again. Thanks, Matthew, Shelby, Claudio. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is absolutely the biggest we've ever had. I see a bunch of questions. We can leave the call open if Matthew, you're able to stick around. If there's any Google Discover, Marfeel specific questions, we'll leave the chat open for about 5 minutes. Matthew, if you're able to stick around and answer those Marfeel specific questions. For anyone who's raised a hand in the chat and has a Discover specific question, please put it in the chat, and Shelby and I can take an inventory of the messages that we have and the questions that were asked and see how we can filter that into upcoming editions of WTF as SEO. And with that, I just want to say a final thanks. Thank you so much, everyone who came and stuck around for the entire hour. It was so terrific to see so many familiar names and faces, as well as such a big new audience for us. So final thank you, everyone, for coming out.
And I did, for those that are still here, just posted a link for a feedback form for us. We do these panels, these talks all the time, and we just want to hear how we can do better, how we can work with partners better, sponsors, whoever you want to hear from. So please give us any feedback about how we can better provide for this community. And again, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See you, buddy. And yeah, I'm super happy to stick around if anybody has any Marfeel specific questions. I don't have anything for actually even the next hour. So if we really want to get deep in the weeds, even on the call.
I can ask some questions that I saw come up in the chat. If people wanted information on pricing, is the best point of contact Matthew to get in touch with you or Sam, who's on the call?
Yeah, I would say get in touch with either of us. I can also drop this link in the chat, and you'll be able to see all the pricing information there. So if you can access that link, that's where you're going to be able to get the pricing. If it doesn't work, you can let me know.
And maybe if you want to drop your email in the chat as well, or Sam's.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Do you have an example, Matthew, of Discover monitoring tool to see how to track articles that are doing well in Discover from competitors? So I think the question is just, do you have competitive analysis in Marfeel?
Yeah. So what you could do is, when I was going over going the filtering by hosts. If you had a certain group of hosts that you wanted to look at, so say you had 5 competitors that you always wanted to keep track of, you could set a report to only look at what's doing well from those 5 competitors over the last 2 hours, today, last 28 days, whatever. And you could save that report into a dashboard and just access that whenever you wanted. You wouldn't need to go back and like rebuild the report each day. You could just go into your dashboard and access it within seconds. So yeah, you can definitely do that.
Okay, cool. There are some questions about specific countries. Do you have, I guess the best thing to do would be to reach out directly to Matthew or Sam in terms of coverage based on region.
Yeah, if I mean, I can check right now if we have whatever country you're asking about.
Sorry, I scrolled past it. I think maybe Estonia.
Estonia. No Estonia currently, but we'd love to add it.
Okay, terrific.
Jessie, just
yep.
heads up. I have to drop off. The recording should still stay since you're in it, but it'll end when you leave. So we still have all of this for everyone as well.
Terrific. I think I was only going to stick around for another 5 minutes, so 12:05. So I think just for everyone still on the call, please feel free. The emails for the Marfeel contacts are in the chat. Feel free to make use of that. Anyone who is still here, please fill out the feedback form. And also I dropped in the chat to our SEO for Journalism site where the link to join Slack is. So if that doesn't work, feel free just to email us, seoforjournalism@gmail.com, and we can make sure you get added to our Slack channel to keep the conversation going. Okay, and any final questions I think can be directed to the email Sam just posted, sam.morris@marfeel.com, or matthew.bain at marfeel.com. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Thank you all again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Take care, everyone.